Welcome to Right Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. I'm your host, Kitty Bucholtz, and this is episode 268, Estates and Wills, an interview with David E Edey, coming to you on Thursday, September 30th, 2021. Do you have a will? I'm afraid I am one of the many people who keep meaning to get around to it, and I still haven't done it. I've made tiny baby steps, but that won't matter if the day comes that I need a will and I don't have one. So in all of the encouragement that I try to give you in the show for writing, for your personal life, for publishing, we also need to talk about what we're going to do with our business after we die. We're all going to die, not a surprise. It's no big deal. It happens to the best of us, but it is a big deal to make sure that if you have certain things that you want to happen, that you've written them down in a document that is both legally binding and something people can find. Also very important, as David explains to us. So this is a nudge in the right direction for you to think about making sure that you have a will in place, that you have figured out what other kinds of estate planning you need to do. You can decide on an executor, which David talks about a lot in this episode as well. And also, what are you going to do with your intellectual property and your digital assets? Do you want them transferred to someone else? Do you want somebody else to manage it so that your estate can continue to receive money from the sale of your books and other items? These are all the questions that you need to ask yourself and talk to a professional so that you can get it all organized, and then you'll be ready. You'll be ready, and the whole process will be a lot smoother for everyone. There are times when I think, well, when I die, it doesn't matter to me anymore. But as David again reminds us, what you don't want to do is to leave people who are grief-stricken with yet another burden that maybe they don't even know how to do, or they don't know what you wanted done. Maybe you just want your business sold and stopped, and it'll just go away. But people need to know that. And it's great if you can help them to have everything that they need so that they can still be thinking about you and how they feel about you and missing you, and not overburdened with a whole bunch of other things that they don't know where to find your information or even what you wanted done. So we all need to just make this happen and get it done, put it behind us. So here's an episode to encourage you to do the same, as I also am going to be working on for the rest of this year. Speaking of this year, this is the last episode of season 3. Remember, in 2021, I started having 4 10-episode seasons with 3 weeks in between. So we had 10 episodes in every quarter. Now that's 10 regular Thursday episodes. I still do the encouraging words episode on the first Sunday of every month because I love that. It's probably my favorite episode of the month. So that will always continue, but the regular Thursday episodes now won't start up again until October 28th. And then I have got some amazing guests to bring us through the rest of 2021. You're going to love it. In the meantime, find something to take notes with. And David also has a book that you can buy. The show notes will be on the usual page, which is podcast.rightnowworkshop.com/episodes, and find the episode number 268. You'll have show notes and transcription, links to David's website and his book. So lots of information that can get you well on your way to organizing everything that you need. I hope that you do find this encouraging, and that, like with all the other episodes, I hope that you take action. The reason why it's called Right Now in all caps with an exclamation point is because we need to write now. We need to write our books, get them done. And there are other business things that we also need to do now. And this is one of them. I hope that you find this encouraging, helpful, and don't feel depressed about it. It's just a piece of business that needs to be done. Just look at it that way. It's a piece of administrative business that needs to be done in your business. All right. Have a great day, week, month. I will see you on the Encouraging Words episode in a few days, and then we'll see you at the end of October. Meanwhile, here's David talking about estates and wills. Today's guest is David E Edey. David is a certified executor advisor who has worked in the financial planning industry in Montreal for more than 35 years. He has advised hundreds of clients, written over 200 articles about personal finance, and shared his expertise on radio and television myriad times. But David is not just an expert. He's someone who knows this topic inside and out from personal experience, having spent 7 years and $50,000 in lawyer fees to come to an agreement with his siblings over his parents' estate, and that was with a written will. The grief, frustration, and stress of that experience were life-altering for David. He was determined to write this book in order to help others successfully navigate the difficult tasks of estate planning and executorship so that their families could stay together rather than fall apart. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Kitty. Thanks for having me. This is going to be so exciting. This is fun. Okay.
It's not very often that you talk to somebody about some sort of legal thing and you're like, this is going to be fun. I think we both agree.
Yeah. Well, yes. And talking about death or any of these issues it's not fun. I get it. But it has to be talked about. And the reason why a lot of people don't talk about it is because for three things: they're reluctant, they're going to procrastinate, or they're apathetic. Yeah. And if we can just get over those issues and just deal with this situation, what has to get done so that you don't leave your family in chaos and traumatized if something was to happen, then everything is going to work out fine, because this is probably the best gift that you could give to your family.
Yeah. And that makes sense. It certainly is something that I've always thought, oh yeah, that makes sense for all those people with children, but me without children, it's still an important part of my life planning, right?
Absolutely. Because if you have a significant other, you want to make sure that you leave things organized for them. In my book, I talk about with a lady who her husband was sick with cancer. And she noticed that over the last couple of months, he would go up to the cottage and he would be fixing up everything. And as he deteriorated and when he passed away, she was going through his things, but she found an envelope and he had written out everything what she needed to do, so she wasn't going to be stressed. She was able to handle the grief a little bit better because he had taken those sort of problems that she had probably never even thought of, and he had taken care of that for her. So yeah. It's just about being organized. Again, like I said, it's not a subject that people want to talk about, but it needs to be talked about.
Yeah, especially because you don't want to be like I've had a couple of friends and also some friends of friends who thought that everything was going to go fine and then realized that the laws in the state that they currently lived in weren't the same and were making life very difficult for them because they had only looked up what needed to be done the first time they wrote a will and when they lived in a different state.
Absolutely. So if it's a state, doesn't matter where you are in the world, there are going to be estate issues and different laws. But the book covers basically the overview of what you need to get done and to be organized. Because as an executor, or if you're planning your estate, you can't do the job alone. So you need to have some professionals to help you settle the estate. So again, it comes back to being organized and also having a team of professionals that you can tap into to get the job done.
Yeah. Let's talk about your book a little bit. So it's pretty much brand new, right? It came out this month, September 2021.
Absolutely. It came about. One was going through what I was going through with the family. And one day during one of those 10 times driving to court, I said to my sister, you know what, this is a book. And I'd written investment books about 20 years ago. And publishing a book and writing is a hard thing to do, as your listeners and viewers will know. And I didn't want to go through it. And then the pandemic hit, and I live here in Montreal, Canada, and I was looking out the window and the snow's coming down. I figured, what am I going to do? So I decided, well, you know what? Why not write a book? And the subject, I'll write about something that I know about. So I wrote the book during the pandemic.
Excellent. And it's called, for anybody who's listening and can't see the book cover, which is on the YouTube version, it's called Executor Help, how to settle an estate, pick an executor, and avoid family fights. And I was going through the table of contents. It's a pretty comprehensive book as far as like all the things that I could think of to ask as a question, and a bunch of things that I couldn't have thought of to ask as a question seem to be covered. You start with how to handle grief, which is a really interesting place to start, and go all through picking an executor, how to be someone else's executor, how to handle pets, how to handle business, and so much more. So why don't you give us a little bit of an idea for people who are thinking about, we'll talk about the writing process first, and then let's talk about the subject matter. So for people who are writing or thinking about writing a nonfiction book, you have 35 years of experience in your head. How did you decide to figure out how to translate that into, like, did you start with an outline? Did you start going through your 200 articles that you'd already written? How did you decide to begin?
Well, what I did was I wanted to use my story, and then every time, and that's actually kind of how the book came about. Every time I would talk about the situation I was going through, I'd hear about one more estate that had gone wrong, an executor had, and I thought it was just only me. And so I didn't want other people to go through what I went through. So I came up with the concept of the book. And then what I've done is taken stories and conversations that I've had with other people who have come to me and tell me their story. So the book it's an easy read. As people, when I'm in the writing process, in Canada and also in the US, there's a gentleman by the name of David Chilton. He wrote a book called The Wealthy Barber. He sold over 5 million books.
Wow.
So he was a self-publisher. Then he went to a publisher, but I know him, and he'd give me a bunch of tips. And he also has an online course on how to write a book and do the marketing. So I've sort of also followed in that footsteps. And one of the main things that he always points out is don't bore the reader. Actually, right here in my office, I've got a big sticker on my computer, and I'd have that as I'm writing, don't bore the reader. You're writing, but you also have to take in consideration someone has taken the time to buy your book and read it. So they're taking time out of everything else that they're being bombarded, Netflix, social media, and they're taking time to read your book, your work. So you need to figure out, how am I not going to bore the reader? And from there, that's where I started with, don't bore the reader, and have stories and make it relatable through part of my other writing process. My other part of the writing process is I tested everything. So from the title to the cover to actually the cover, I thought I liked the cover, and then I sent it to my testers, and they came back and they didn't like it, and they made some suggestions, and the cover was tested and changed, and all the way through the process, I let some beta readers test the chapters, come back and tell me. So everything through the process and what you have here as the final book has been beta tested. Again, I'd ask the question, were you bored? Did you learn anything? And once I had that and I had the feedback, then I'd continue on. But I had an outline. That was pretty much a long answer. Did I answer the question? Sorry.
Well, let's have you finish that thought. So you did start with an outline?
Yes, I did. And from there, I would break it down, because I had the outline of what the book would be about, because I had a title, a good subtitle. And then from there, I just broke them down into little individual projects, individual chapters. Yes. So in the book, you don't have to read the whole book. You can just read, you don't have to go chapter by chapter. You can, pick the chapter that you need to be, you're concerned about, whether it's what do I do with my pets or digital assets. And you can just read that. You don't have to read the whole book. I mean, I hope you read the whole book, but the feedback I've gotten is that it's an easy read and people are learning a lot. And that's all the reason I wrote it.
So I'm sure that reading it from cover to cover gives you some, for someone like me, like I know a lot, I think, until somebody were to ask me a question, and I'll be like, wow, I guess I don't know a lot. I think I do because I've lived a long time. Right. And when I was reading all the chapter titles, I was like, oh yeah, that, those all make sense for, books about, estate planning and will planning and that sort of thing. But then I realized I don't actually know how to do any of those things. I just know the words and the concepts.
Right.
So one of the things that I really appreciated was that at the end of every chapter, you have sort of like a help section. Tell us about that.
Exactly. So in that part there, I call it the Executor Help solution. So basically, I break it down to what are the biggest dangers and problems that are going to cause you stress and headaches. And then I go to what you need to do and where to get the help. And then I talk about by completing those tasks and getting those things done, how it's going to help you. Because at the end of the day, you want to make it, you want to reduce the dangers and the stress in your life because of this situation, and be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And not have again, avoid family fights.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. What else should I ask you about the actual writing? Because I also want to get into the actual meat of the book and how that applies to us as writers.
Right.
Anything that comes to mind as, this is something I learned that I didn't expect, or this is something that I would want to share with others, like beware of this challenge that I didn't expect when writing your first, or not your first, but your first nonfiction book in a while.
Right. Difference between 20 years ago writing a book and today. 20 years ago, we didn't have the internet, didn't have social media. I wouldn't be on a podcast talking to you 20 years ago to promote the book. The publishing industry has changed, the book marketing has changed, and then you throw in the curve that the pandemic has brought, and the book marketing area aspect of the publishing business has changed as well. And it's just to organize, be organized, read the book, because everybody has to go through this situation, whether they like it or not, and pick the points that are important. What you said at the beginning about how to handle grief. That actually, I was partway through the book when I figured out, the steps that people have to go through. If you have to settle an estate, that's one part of the job. But you know what? You still got to handle the grief. There's the shock, there's the trauma of losing a loved one or being involved in this situation. And I wanted to at least have people understand, how to put their mind at ease so that they can tackle the big job, because it's a big job. Depending on where you live, it can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to settle an estate, and you're looking at over 100 hours to get everything done. So it's and then on top of that, you pile on the trauma of a death, and it can be very difficult for a lot of people to get things done.
Yeah. And were there topics that you originally wrote down on your outline and then realized that's more than is the focus of my book, or it would make the book too long, or I'm going off on a rabbit trail? Was there anything that you cut?
No, actually what I added was, which would be of interest to your listeners, is that the areas of succession planning and what if you're an executor of someone who has a business. That wasn't in the original outline. And part of my research, I was serving business owners, and it was basically on the subject of the whole book. And when I sent out a survey, 70% came back and said they didn't have a succession plan. And then I thought, well, that's kind of odd. So I dug a little deeper. So business owners and people who ran their own business, they had no way to help their family or organize their family if something was to happen to them if they had a business. Same thing if you were asked to be an executor and the individual ran a business. So those are the two chapters that I added that weren't in the original draft, the original outline. And that's only because I did the research. Yeah,
to find out these are some more questions that people are going to have that they keep having.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, fabulous segue, because now I want to move into talking about, and I don't know what the right way of saying it is, estate planning, writing a will. I don't know if one is part of the other, or I'll let you explain, but let's talk about it in terms of people who are listening, who either have multiple books out and make, well over a good living as a writer, pretty
Right.
much an entrepreneur with their own business, all the way down through, I make a few $1,000s a year, a few $100s a year. I haven't made any money yet, but what should I do? There's a lot of room there that I don't know how to help people if someone were to ask me.
Okay. Well, I think we should start, if we're going to talk, and it doesn't matter if you're an author making a lot of money from your business and the books, or someone who's just made a few $100s. Let's start from there. So besides your estate plan, whereby you need to have a will and you have an executor, you need to have a succession plan. And by a succession plan means to have a plan that if you became incapacitated or you died. So you want to be able to let them know who's going to be in charge of the business if you're not there. Is it going to be a loved one? Have you made a provisions to have it sold, or are you going to want it to be shut down? So you want to let the family know what they need to do for the business, because especially if this business is a revenue generator, which is the family income, which is bringing in dollars every month to sustain the family. Okay, so what you need to do and get help is that within that estate plan, as I said before, you need to make sure that you have a will, make sure that you've got a power of attorney, make sure you've picked an executor, and then update it regularly by, make sure that you've got a team of professionals. Is there a lawyer there's a lawyer you should be talking to, an accountant, and as your business starts to grow, then you also want to talk with your lawyer and accountant how to progress in terms of your succession plan. And then also you want to make sure that everybody understands where your digital assets are. So if something was to happen, where are all the passwords going to be kept? Because no one knows your logins to your Facebook and your digital bank account, all of those things. So if you can think of everything where you log in, if something was to happen, and especially if it affects your business, how is someone going to access those digital assets to your business? So you need to be organized with that. If you do those things as a business owner, have a succession plan and figure that out, you're going to be confident knowing that you've planned in case of an emergency. The business can function because either you've made an idea, or you let people know who's going to run the business, or you want it sold, but you've got it organized. But the most important thing is that your family is not going to be lost or disorganized. And that's what you're trying to stay away from, especially if you're a one-person business owner, to make sure that your family's not lost or disorganized, because they know you, and they know you go off and you do your business, but the business is a separate entity, and something happens to you, you're incapacitated or you die. There again, we're coming back to trauma and chaos. They're in trauma, they're in chaos. They don't know what to do with this entity. You might be on a deadline for an editor, or all of those things. You might have been given a book advance, or you might have clients. What's the plan of action if something was to happen? So as a business owner, you have to have some sort of succession plan in place. Okay. Now, on the flip side, am I going too fast, or am I okay?
No, I'm staying with you so far. You haven't lost me yet.
So let's say, for example, now you are an executor to someone who has a business. Okay. So the biggest dangers you're going to come across is that you don't know what the person who owns the business, what's their plan. You don't know what the succession is going to be. If you've just been asked, and a lot of people are always asked just to be an executor, or they find out by accident that they're an executor, you need to know, you should have a conversation with them to let them know, okay, if something is to happen, you're going to find in this bright red envelope all of the passwords. Here are the bank accounts, all of those sort of things. It's sort of like break this glass in case of emergency. think of that big red envelope that you who that the testator or person whose will your estate that you're settling is that they've made allowance to make sure that all the important information is in a bright red envelope. You want to be able to know that, be able to handle, to talk to clients and customers. So as the executor, you want to be prepared. If you're an executor of someone who has a business, you want to be in a situation that you have an idea of how to keep that business going or how to put it, set it up for it to be sold. Right. So that it's not going to be, because, you're going to have to deal with business tax and all of those sort of things. The accountant, again, that should be in that bright red envelope that the testator has left for you. So whether you're setting up an estate and you need a succession plan, or you're an executor and the person has a business, you need to know what's going on. And all of that, if you tie all those things that I've talked about together, it's all about having a conversation. You need to have a conversation with your family, let them know about the succession. If you need to have a conversation with the executor. And if you are asked to be an executor of someone who has a business, you need to let them know, yes, I'm taking on this responsibility, but these are some of the things I need to know to make it a lot easier on me to get the job done.
Wow. Okay. I only have about 10 questions from that. So
okay.
Let me start with a couple. So one thing you kind of touched on, all of my assets, are on or accessed by one of my two computers. So leaving my special document that has a different name, which used to be called passwords for a long time until the internet got so popular that people could hack into other people's files. Then I finally changed the name. Yeah. So that special document, it does nobody any good while it's still on my computer, right? So that's why you're talking about some
Absolutely.
of the stuff needs to be printed.
Exactly. So you need to get forms and just write out all of those. And if you think about all your digital footprint that you have everywhere, not only for your business, but personally, that's a whole different area which can cause a lot of problems for people. And that's why I talk about that in the book, that it opens you up. If someone finds out that you've passed away, but those accounts are still open, you've opened yourself up to theft and theft identity. So that you need to make sure that your executor knows, okay, not only do you know where, what's going on in the business, but these are all the digital, my digital footprint, all the passwords are. So they know. So I would print it out. I mean, you put it on a thumb drive, but I also would print it out and say, you know what, in that bright red envelope or orange envelope, it should be big enough so that someone could trip over it.
Yeah.
You'll find all of that information if anything was to happen. Because when someone becomes incapacitated or dies, there's trauma. And no one wants to be looking for anything when they're being traumatized. They can't find anything. They can't think straight. So if you can make it as easy as possible for your executor, it's going to be a lot easier. And you as an executor, it's going to be a lot easier on you to know, okay, fine. They told me, look for that big orange envelope, and there it's going to have everything.
Yeah. All right. Now, would it be safe, I guess, is the word that I'm thinking. And now we're talking about internet safety, which is not necessarily, your realm of expertise, but I'm just thinking about all the different things where I have a shared Dropbox folder with, my cover designer, or I have a shared Dropbox folder with somebody else. Could all the information be in something like that, or is that not?
Well, you could have shared docs. You might have the name of the cover designer, and if something was to happen, let them, the executor, contact them and say, you know what, something's happened to Kitty. She's got on your list here for the cover design. Is there anything that we need to know, or I need to shut it down? But you don't have to for that. If it's a shared one, just say, for cover design, contact so and so. But all of those things are all been mapped out, been organized on that sheet.
I was just wondering about all of the things that we were talking about, printing out and putting in the great big bright red envelope. Like, could I put it in a Dropbox folder that's shared between me and the executor? Okay,
so I'll flip it to you then. How would your executor know to go to that Dropbox?
Because I would say, here's the folder where I'll keep on always updating everything that's like password related, or if I open a new account to publish a
Okay,
book in
so
a different space.
and where will the password be for that Dropbox folder?
I I'm not sure whether or not you can password protect a shared folder. And that's your question, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So that would be a good place to just put some
And,
preliminary
and think
information.
think of it one more thing. You're making it one step harder on your executor to now go into Dropbox. You and I are having the conversation. Dropbox. You know what? That's in our vocabulary. You know, we know how to get in. But suppose your executor is not as computer savvy as you.
Yeah.
To get into Dropbox. Try and make it as easy as possible for the executor to get things done. Because now, like, well, what the heck is Dropbox? I don't know what Dropbox is. Who's in it? So again, if it's the password or for information, this is about my cover design. This is the person to contact them. Put their email address in there and let the executor at least have that so that they can contact the person.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. And I'm just thinking about some of the things that change with some regularity in my business life. Like sometimes I have clients who work with me for just a few months. Sometimes it's 6 months at a time. So I'd have to be updating this information in the bright red folder with some right. And the websites that ask you, you have to change your password now. It's been too long. And I'm thinking some of the stuff, it just needs to be updated regularly as part of your regular administrative duties in your business.
Absolutely. You'd want to do that. Maybe it's every 90 days, once a year. I mean, I know changing the passwords and all sort of stuff like that, it may seem mundane and tedious, but even if you do any way you can make it as easy as possible for the executor to get things done, it'll save them months and months of heartache. And to give you an example, in the book, I talk about the individual, Tony Hsieh, who was the CEO of Zappos, passed away at a young age, 46, had a couple $100 million estate, didn't have a will, and they had to get his brother and father to be the executor to organize, because he had many different business dealings going on. I mean, he revitalized downtown Las Vegas. They go into his house, and across the wall were hundreds and hundreds of Post-it notes of all the different business dealings and all of this. And what's happened is, people are suing the estate because there was no succession. There was no, this is what I've got going on. This is what I should be doing. So it doesn't matter if you're, an estate of a couple $100 million or just a small estate, just I'm going to say regular writer, just an average writer or regular writer.
Yeah.
You've left your executor in a tough predicament, because now every day someone can say, well, you know what? I paid Kitty for, this job, and they didn't pay, she didn't deliver, and I gave her an advance, or, I've got outstanding work with Kitty, but she didn't do anything with it. So you want to have that list of, okay, these are either the deals I have going on, or check this ledger and this is what's outstanding, or anything like that. Again, wherever you can figure out to make it as easy as possible for the executor to get the job done, it's going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, I can't say that I'm not intimidated by all of the stuff that I have to do, but I understand that I would not want my husband, or we don't have kids. So I'm like, when me and my husband die, like, it's not really going to affect anybody, is it? But I have no idea how it works. So,
well, even if you don't have kids, you might want to look into being philanthropic and leave assets to charities, something that you've been continuously during your lifetime now been giving to charities. Why not give a larger gift? And it could be one lump sum, or you might say, you know what, over the next couple of years, they get a certain amount. So it's not, being philanthropic is not something that you're not doing right now. Only thing is just leaving a larger donation.
Right.
So if you haven't got kids, then that could be something, and you give to causes that either you already giving to, or something, a new cause that you'd like to give to. Do research
Right.
and find out something that maybe you would like leave your estate to.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right, because I do want to do that. Wow. Okay. Wow, what else should I ask? I have some questions written down for you. One of the things that I was thinking about is, for most of us, in that right now, 21st century writers, most of our business is being run online. Whether we're traditionally published or self-publishing, pretty much everything that we do, we make the contact, we upload the file, we get the money. It's all happening online. So I was thinking, well, I think that I'd like to choose an executor who also is completely, like, the online world is just like the regular world to them. Like, they're not, tech phobic at all.
Okay.
Are these things that we like? What sorts of questions? I know you have some chapters on picking an executor. Is how they would interact with what you're leaving behind one of the questions that you would ask yourself when you decide who to pick? Like my brother, he can run a computer, but I don't ask him to, like, I don't even text him. He doesn't like texting,
Okay.
versus my friend who works all day on a computer and on the internet. Yeah.
Kitty, you're trying to, again, avoid making that big red folder. Okay. Because if for your brother, he doesn't like texting. And so you're saying, well, maybe I'll find somebody who's more tech savvy online stuff. If that's the person that you choose, just make it easier on him. So why not give a list to your brother, the list of passwords to what he needs to do, and move on from there. You're making it more difficult by trying to find somebody who's more tech savvy, who's more online and stuff like that. All you want to do is make it easier on the executor so that they can settle the estate, pay the taxes, and distribute to whoever the beneficiaries are. So the easier you can make it, the quicker it's going to go, and the less stress and burden you're going to put on your executor. Right. So to answer your question, don't be so rigid in the person that you're looking for. In my book, I talk about who you should be looking for. Just make it as easy as possible for them.
Okay. All right. And then that brought up another question. I was wondering, I know that my older sister, Bonnie, she apparently just is really good at organizing people's estates after they die. And people keep asking her to be executor of their estate. So she's already done this a few times. She has her own business. It's not like she has free time on her hands and she's just trying to figure out, what should I do with it? Oh, I should just be executor of my friends and family's estates. So how does it work when, I feel like the fair, nice, good thing to do is that somehow they should be reimbursed for the time that they spend. Is there some way that is there some norm having to do with that?
Well, first off, if this is what your sister's good at, clearly you should take that poster from behind you and she's got a superpower. So you need to give her that superpower. So she's got it. So to answer your question, it depends. If you put in your will that your executors should be paid for their time that they're, it varies from state to state, but yes, executors can be paid, but a lot of times the executor is also a beneficiary. So they're not being, probably not getting compensation, but that's up to you in your will. You might say, you know what, over and above what this individual is getting, a percentage for their time and the photocopy and that sort of stuff, they should be reimbursed. So there's no one right answer, but there is the leeway that you can decide how you want your executor to be compensated.
Okay. And that just goes in your will then?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I think that maybe I'm less nervous than I was at the beginning of our conversation.
Well, you've got a lot of good things going for you. You've got a brother that now is going to, if he's going to be the executor, he could be organized. and because you've got that big red folder, and you've also got a sister who's got superpowers, who's good at being an executor. So I think you're pretty much set. The only thing is you need to just get yourself organized.
Yeah, yeah. And now this won't apply too much to people listening, but it may apply to more people listening than I realize. So I am currently an expatriate. So I'm an American citizen, but living in Sweden. All of my family is in the US.
Right.
And I wasn't sure whether or not the executor should live in the same place that I live in, or if it would be better if they just is somebody that I trust and know, and doesn't matter where they live.
I talk a little bit about that in the book. It would be better if the executor was close to where you are, but again, there's no one right answer. Okay. And the reason for that is because the executor has to spend a lot of time, like I said, maybe over 100 hours settling the estate. And so it also could be going to a lot of places during a 9 to 5, during a working hours, and may have to leave work to go do things that have to be done. Having said that, I've also had people who they have two executors, one who's local, and then they have another executor who may be overseas, and they're working in tandem, and the second executor will come to the location once they can, but they're in constant contact with each other to get the job done. You need whatever makes the most sense to make it easier for the executor, because that's what you have to keep in mind is what you're looking at. You can't, if somebody's on the other side of the world, you can't expect them to get the job done properly. But you might have a local person who knows a little bit more about what's going on, and the two of them know each other, and then you can go from there. They could work together.
There was a time, when humans were allowed to freely roam the earth back then, that whenever my husband, it was so long ago that I can't remember exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. Yeah.
But because John and I have no children and no relatives nearby, in fact, we've lived someplace far away from our family. Even when we lived in the same country, it was still like the other end of the country. That I would always email one or two people, somebody who was a friend of mine who would know whether or not I didn't show up again from my trip, didn't show up at church or didn't show up at work, and as well as one of my relatives, and say, this is the flight information. This is the trip that we're taking. If this flight, I wouldn't say it this way, but I was thinking, if you see this flight number on the news and the plane went down, you might want to look into seeing whether or not, I need you to be the executor of my estate.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what I've done so far. And it's the only thing that I've done, is just to make sure that people know whether or not I have lived through whatever recent trip I've taken and have come home, and they can all ignore me from now on again.
I don't know what to say to that. I don't know. That's okay.
But I need to add a will onto that. That shouldn't be my entire.
Well, no, not add a will onto that. That's your starting point. This whole rigmarole you just gave me here, I have no idea where we're going with that. Why don't you start with, but like I said, getting back to it, you've got two positive things there. You've got a brother that you can do it, and you've also got, again, a sister with superpowers who's good at this. So between that and maybe someone local that you can, could be the liaison with one or both of them, then they could be, then you've got a team of executors. The important thing is that they're going to communicate with each other, and they'll be able to get the job done. But hopefully it should be even if it's going to go over to your husband as your first executor, then you still have to make sure that he knows what's going on with your business. And then and vice versa, what's going on in his situation, what his passwords are, all of those sort of things like that. And then secondary, if you're both are gone, then you might have your team of executors. I'm just using an example. I'm not saying that's where you should go, but you've already got some qualified candidates, but you have to have that conversation with them too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So now I'm thinking through, what one of us dies, and then so whose siblings should it be? And okay, yes, lots of conversations to have.
Okay, then.
Woo. Well,
Wow.
hopefully I haven't asked questions in such a way that listeners are more confused. And I will say your book is wonderful, especially for someone like me who I haven't really read or done much of anything. I think I bought some software once on like Quicken Will Maker. I found it in a box the other day and I was like, oh, I don't think I actually used this. I meant to.
So what you're telling me, that's a sign as well. There's a lot of signs now with you, Kitty. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I read in your one sheet that, and tell me if I am remembering this wrong, but people in their 30s are actually doing a better job at getting a will done than people in their 50s.
Yes. And that's probably because of the pandemic. For some
Oh,
reason that, all of this sort of, again, I don't want to put it in the wrong context, but this death around them, they're seeing people dying, people, loved ones passing away, or they're hearing about it, that they are acting on getting the wills versus someone who's in their 50s. They're not keeping up to date. In the book, I use the quote, intensive care is no place to find out that dad has no will. So
right.
the older we get, it's going to come back to, are you being reluctant? Are you procrastinating? Or are you being apathetic?
Yeah.
So also during the pandemic, people didn't have time on their way to the hospital, stop at a lawyer's office.
Yeah.
They went straight to the hospital. So again, it's up to you in terms of how you want to leave your family. Do you want to leave them disorganized? Do you want to leave them traumatized? Do you want to leave them in chaos? This is probably the best gift you could ever give them, is to make sure that you're organized and have an estate plan set up.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just remembered when you said that. My mom created a will when all the kids were young, but she died when she was 78. So all the kids were grown. And we found out, like you said, it wasn't intensive care, like she was unable to communicate or whatever. But we did find out when she was in her last 2 weeks of life that she didn't have a will that had been updated in 20 years. So a lawyer had to come to the hospital and work through it again with her one more time. And then my sister had to be, made the executor of that will, or however it works. And all of this had to be done in the hospital the week before mom died. So
that's not where that conversation and all that should be being taken place.
Yeah.
And you're all basically in trauma, because look at where mom is and look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
Bringing in the lawyer. But luckily you've got a sister with superpowers, so it works out well.
Yeah. Maybe I'll let her know that if she stops doing this one business, we can hook her up. She can start a new business.
Anything's possible.
David, thank you so much. This was a really interesting conversation, and I apologize that I know so very little about it, but I thank you for being so good at explaining.
Well, that's why I wrote the book, and I want to thank you for having me here. That's why I wrote the book. I didn't want to have people to go through what I went through. So if one person can pick up one little tidbit and help them save their family and their relationships, then my job has been done.
Wonderful. Well, listen, where can people find you and your book online?
It's available on all online retailers, but you can go to davidedey.com. And on there also, I've got some checklists and there's some other resources. And I'm always adding more resources that people will need as an executor, or if they're setting up their estate. So if you go davidedey.com, you'll find more stuff and more.
Terrific.
If that sounds right as a writer. That didn't sound right. But anyway.
More stuff and more.
Yeah, more
and
stuff and more.
Edey is Edey.
Edey, absolutely. davidedey.com.
Excellent. And I was going to say one more thing. Oh, right before we started recording, you and I were talking about maybe we could do a webinar together. So people listening, if you are interested in participating in a webinar on this topic and getting more information, maybe even more specific to what you do as a writer, let me know. And if there's enough interest, then we'll work something out, right?
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure to talk with fellow writers. You know, I was in a writers group here in Montreal, and I always found the conversations and the jokes were even better because as writers, we're at a different level. I don't want to say nothing, but we're at a different level than everybody else. We're a lot, because words are our, it's sort of like our juice. It's what makes us who we are. And talking to writers, that'd be the best thing. That's very cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I'd be happy to do that.
Terrific. Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. We really appreciate all the information.
Thank you very much, Katie. It's been a pleasure to be here.